Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Gregory or Dr. G, and I will be your instructor in this course, Psych 143, The Psychology of Leadership. We're living in a really dynamic time, both in the US and globally. Change is constantly surrounding us, and you can feel it sometimes. And it's sometimes faster than we can really absorb. New technologies have been introduced, growth and opportunities greet us almost at a daily basis. We are ever expanding our globalization, be it through our economies as a result of wars and climate issues that permeate the world, and even through the recent pandemic that we experienced. We no longer work within or just as a cross-border country. We are diversified in almost every nation. We've watched history in changes and growth of nations, the personal growth of wealth over time, which is exceedingly increased in many, but not all countries. So much has changed in just our short part of our lifetimes. We've also witnessed change in our businesses as a result of the pandemic. When we could no longer be face to face, we used a remote work, even in education. And it, for the most part, successfully kept many companies going, although we're seeing companies now trying to reverse that and create at least a hybrid or part in-person, part remote, or even full in-person requirements. So that's caused us all over to rethink the idea of what a workforce is. It used to be a community of people coming together, working side by side every day. Now we have to rethink and say, well, is it necessary that the workforce be physically together? These types of factors that we have now witnessed is really affecting what we think of as leadership. No longer do we sit in corner offices and dictate to workers as a leader. We're seeing sometimes actually a silent protest within the workforce because of these changes. We know it as what we call the great resignation or the silent leaving. And that's the dramatic increase of people choosing to shift their jobs, either leaving their jobs and the workforce altogether, or changing their relationship they have with work. All of these factors that I've talked about affect and have an impact on leadership and what it takes to be a good leader and followership as well. So in this course, we're going to address a few fundamental questions. The first one is, what makes a good leader good? And how do we become skillful and effective leaders in this current world that we live in? We're going to look at that because that's changed dynamically since I began my workforce some many years ago. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at what drives a leader to lead and a follower to follow. What is it that sets us aside to be leaders? And how do we get followers to follow us? It's not a one-way relationship, we now know. How a leader leads will influence how the follower follows. And that could be a direct response to how they respond to the leader themselves or to the organization at large. We'll look at this through the lens of not only psychological factors, but other factors that drive behaviors and actions. And we'll get to that later on in the course, but we'll have a really great week on the relationship between leaders and followers. Now, just to note, we are not just leaders and followers are just not followers. We can do a mix of leading and following in our lives. And we can have these roles simultaneously. We can be a leader to some, maybe our direct reports, and at the same time be a follower to those in the organizational hierarchy above us. And this can happen within moments of our days. So we do experience both of these roles, and you might even see these roles in your personal lives. We may be a leader within our immediate family and a follower within a larger family or community unit. That's question 2. The third question we're going to pose is how to develop and how do organizations develop leaders? How can we start addressing and getting better at improving our roles as leaders, especially with the changes around us? We are often very reactionary as leaders. So how can we become more projecting and thinking ahead and adapting ourselves earlier in the role of leadership when leadership changes? I've seen this through studies where we reflect upon other generations of leaders, but we don't think about how future generations of leaders are going to adapt. We just say, well, there are certain generations such as the baby boom generation, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials, the future generation, I think that's called Generation Alpha. I'm not sure. And we look back and say, historically, how have we addressed these roles in generations? But we're not thinking forward. So let's start looking at ourselves and thinking forward how we address the needs of the future generations as a good leader. Because I will tell you, new generations are demanding more of leaders. Quick little story. I'm at the tail end of the baby boom generation within a few years. So I grew up with baby boomers who were my leaders, and they have a very different leadership style than today's generations who need much more encouragement, much more cheerleading, much more recognition of success. We are also seeing the generation that's coming out of high school and college at this point in time having higher demands on their leaders. So we need to be responsive and not reactive to it. So over the next 7.5 weeks, we'll look at the nature of power and the nature of leadership, the role of empathy and social intelligence and emotional intelligence, and how all of these contribute to the skill set of a leader. We'll look at ethics at the end, and we will identify something that we call the dark side of leadership and how to avoid potential pitfalls when it comes to unchecked leadership and power. Some expectations I have for you as we move through this class, and I have a few. The first one is, this class is not a question and answer class. I'm not going to give you a set of questions and you're just going to answer the questions with 1 or 2 sentences. I want you to become critical thinkers. I want you to think deeply and critically, and that you become an independent thinker. Your perspectives and your opinions matter. And it's important that we have our own unique paths and experiences and discuss those ways that our paths have led us down and brought us here. So I want you to share your perspectives. Another expectation I have is to express rationale when you have a difference of opinions. It's okay that we have differences of opinions. Generations have differences of opinions. Cultures have differences of opinions. Those who have worked in their career profession versus those who are starting their career profession have different perspectives. So we do not think alike. And because of that, we can and sometimes should disagree with the opinions and perceptions of others through discussions, through what we read from the scholars that is going to be in your course pack. And that's okay. But don't just say, I disagree with you, you're wrong, or I don't agree with the writer of the article. Instead, when you disagree, first, disagree respectfully. That's okay. Second, when you disagree, provide your rationale for it. Give us the lens of your perspective and why you think differently than somebody else. There's no right or wrong in these discussions. There's no right or wrong in the papers. What we want you to do is start to think deeply and reflect openly. Another expectation I have with you is, regardless of where you are, observe leadership that is going on around you. It could be leadership in the home, leadership in a community, leadership in a government, leadership in your work. Look at leadership in your personal and professional lives and in the world in general. Read the news about leaders. See what different media outlets are writing about leaders. You might find that media outlets also have very differing opinions of leadership. What are you noting within all of this observation that you align with? Maybe you see traits in those around you or those in politics or those in other countries that you wish to align to. And perhaps you see some that you don't wish to align to. That's okay. One of my first bosses when I was in full-time working, he was a really hard person to work with. He was ex-military. They have a different lens that they view the world in. And so he was a very hard leader to be around because sometimes he was very authoritarian and autonomous in making his discussions. However, as I got to know him and I got to observe his leadership, I actually found him to be much more coaching than authoritative. We used to have these weekly walks, and he would take a break or take a part of his lunchtime, and he would ask someone to walk with him. And we had this little area that was kind of fenced in, you know, you had to go through the fences to park. So we were out in the big parking lot. And if you really paid attention, he was coaching you on how to be a better employee, or how to be a better researcher, or how to start developing leadership styles and behaviors. So I often would watch him in not only my walks with him, but when I would observe him walking with others. And I would start to say, there are some characteristics I really like. There are some that maybe aren't for me, but find out what works well for you and what's not working well for you and why. And start using those as ways of stepping stones to create a better behavior. And finally, I ask and I expect from you to put in the work. This is a 7.5-week class, and there's a fair amount of work involved. It doesn't look like it, but there's a lot of readings. You'll have discussions each week. You will have 4 signature assignments that are going to be due throughout the course. And I want you to put in the time and the work. Don't try to take shortcuts. That only leads you to partial growth and knowledge. Don't simply cut and paste things from the articles. Reflect upon them. Put them in your words. And don't merely read the abstract of an article and try to gain information from it. A lot of these articles are very short, so it should be no problem for you to sit down and within a half hour, an hour, have most of your reading accomplished. Complete the assignments on time, because when you start to fall behind in a very fast-paced class, it's really challenging to try to catch up. There is no extra credit in this class. Now, please review the syllabus because there's information in there on my late policy. So if you do anticipate that you're going to be late for a medical or work reason, reach out to me before the work is due. And speaking of that, the best place for you to begin in this class is read the syllabus. I have all the information you need to acquire your course packs and mostly a calendar of deliverables. Keep this handy. All readings, all discussions, and all assignments are noted in the calendar. I'm also including the rubrics to help guide you in your development of your deliverables. Also in the course room, there will be a weekly checklist of activities that will give you the details beyond what the course calendar and the syllabus is going to give you. Pay attention to that late policy for guidelines and expectations for each, and the guidelines and expectations that we have for each assignment. Do ask me if you have any questions, and always, 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 before you hit that submit button, double check and make sure that you've met all of the requirements and you've addressed all the questions. Do obtain the course pack from Harvard Business Review. It is the required coursework, and the link is provided in the syllabus. I may add additional readings in the weekly course room that can provide you with more resources for you. And I really think that you'll find the articles thoughtful, interesting, and maybe a little evocative. As I said, I will provide you a weekly activity checklist that details all the information you need to accomplish that week. And like this, I will provide a short video sharing my thoughts with you that you can review. That's what I expect from you. Now, what can you expect from me? I will be here with you, facilitating each week, even though we don't see each other physically. And I will engage with you. I'll share my experiences and my perspectives in my weekly discussions with you. And remember, they're my perspectives and my observations from my point of view in both being a leader and being a follower. I hope that we learn from each other and we challenge each other to go deeper into these ideas. Now, we have a fairly large class, but I will try to be responsive to all of you and any questions you may have. I may post discussions to you throughout the week to have you expand more on your thoughts or perspectives or share more of mine. Now, we have some work to do this week, so be sure you hit the ground running. Let's have fun, okay? This is an exciting time to be studying leadership, and I look forward to getting to know all of you. Bye-bye for now.